at MetLife. The Jets are 3-8. The Seahawks are 6-5. Why does this game look like a major trap game? I'm going to be taking a look at why the Seahawks can't take Aaron Rodgers and company lightly here on a pregame Sunday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, happy game day to all the 12s out there. Since it's Thanksgiving week, doing things a little bit differently. We didn't have a Friday show, spending time with our family. Hope you enjoyed time with your family and loved ones during the Thanksgiving holiday. But that means we've still got plenty to knock out here before kickoff coming up a little over an hour from now in East Rutherford. We've got keys to victory. We've got a game plan for the Seahawks to win in New Jersey, picks to click, and much more. Brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Sunday pregame show of Locked On Seahawks. Going into today's game, when you look at the records, you look at the way that the Seahawks and Jets have played as of late, this feels like it should be a game that the Seahawks are heavily favored, but they are making the trip on the road. It's a 10 a.m. Pacific time start, and even though the Seahawks have been really good in those games throughout the Pete Carroll era, and so far with Mike McDonald as the head coach, they have continued to play well in those games. Those are still tricky trips, especially when you're going all the way cross country from Seattle to New Jersey to face the Jets. And when you look at New York, they are coming off their bye week. For whatever reason, the Seahawks have played a million teams this year that are coming off their bye weeks. It didn't matter for the Cardinals last week, but the Jets have been really banged up, particularly Aaron Rodgers. If you've watched the Jets this season, Aaron Rodgers has been hobbled for much of the year because he's been taking hits, and obviously coming off the Achilles injury last year. He is an older quarterback. It's going to be tougher for him to recover when he gets battered and bruised, and the Jets offensive line has not necessarily done a great job of protecting him for much of the season. But with a bye week, he wasn't even listed on their final injury report this week. He seems to be trending towards being the healthiest he's been in quite some time. So that's the first thing that jumps out to me as far as, I don't necessarily like the label trap game, but I think it fits in this case because you're talking about a team at 3-8 that has not played to the talent level. They've had their coach fired, their general manager fired. Aaron Rodgers reportedly has been looked at as possibly being benched or placed on injury reserve. I mean, there's been all kinds of drama, and none of it has been good in New Jersey. But this is still a team that's got a lot of talent, and it really starts at the quarterback position. For me, the reason this game looks like a textbook version of a trap game, even though the Jets are 3-8, that healthier Aaron Rodgers element coming off a bye week, that is the first thing that really scares me going into this game from a Seahawks perspective, because when you look at the way the Jets have played this year, Rodgers has not had a great season. 17 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Those are still solid numbers, obviously, but it's not what people are accustomed to seeing from him. And he has not been near as mobile coming off that Achilles injury, some of the other issues he's been dealing with physically this year. If he is able to move a little bit better today because he's just in general feeling better, I think that gives the Jets a much better chance to be able to hold serve at home and make this one a close one, even potentially pull off the upset. The second thing, and this is the more common denominator here, when we're talking about this Jets team, their defense is still really good in terms of how they've handled pass defense. The run defense, I'll get to more of that later in the show, hasn't necessarily been as good this year, but they're still a top 2 pass defense in almost every category. And one of the reasons for that, everybody's going to talk about the secondary, but Quinnen Williams up front, he is in the top 10 in the NFL among defensive tackles in pressures. He is tied for second in sacks. He is in the top 12 in pass rush win rate. The guy is an absolute wrecking ball in the middle. And Seattle's going to be starting a rookie in Satawa Lamea at right guard. Laken Tomlinson at left guard. Yes, this is his former team. He's gone against Quinnen Williams. Maybe that works to his advantage. But still, he has not had a great season, or even a good season for the Seahawks. That interior offensive line has been troublesome. You're dealing with a player who, to me, is a top 3 defensive tackle in Quinnen Williams. You've got Javon Kinlaw, formerly a first-round pick of the 49ers, who's got 21 pressures and 3 sacks this year. So he's not Williams, but he's actually had a pretty solid year being the Robin to the Batman, so to speak, on New York's defensive line. They've got some other pieces at the edge rusher positions to worry about as well. But I look at that interior led by Quinnen Williams, the matchups that he's going to be licking his lips about, either Laken Tomlinson or a first-time starter in Seattle Seahawks, who's actually never dressed for an NFL regular season game, and you're throwing him into the lineup for this one. Williams is mostly played on the right side, which would mean he'd be playing most of his snaps against Laken Tomlinson. But I could see the Jets making some adjustments in this game. Williams has played plenty on both sides. I could see them trying to take advantage of the fact that LaMea has not played any snaps in the regular season. He's a sixth-round rookie and trying to capitalize on that. So that certainly is scary going into this game. And last but not least, I mentioned the secondary. There are very few teams in the NFL that have enough talent at the cornerback position to be able to match up across the board against the receivers the Seahawks have. And they've got Metcalf back healthy. Jackson Smith and Jigba is on a tear the last 3 games. Tyler Lockett hasn't had the best season of his career, but he's still one of those guys that any given Sunday can put together a solid game if you forget about him. But he is as good of a number 3 receiver as you're going to find in the NFL. There are not many teams that have a set of corners that across the board can stack up against those 3. The Jets are one of the few teams that you can say that about. Sauce Gardner has given up 1 touchdown this year. Not quite as dominant of numbers overall as he had his rookie year when he won Defensive Rookie of the Year, but he's still been really sticky, and he's been instrumental in the fact that the Jets are first in air yards or yards after the catch. They're near the middle of the pack as far as air yards, but they're first in air or yards after the catch this year. He's also been instrumental in the fact they're second in passing yards given up in total this season. He has still been stifling on the outside. Former Seahawks starter DJ Reed is having another really good year, has only given up 1 touchdown in coverage as well. And Michael Carter II, New York's slot corner, he's 5th among slot corners this year with a 70.8 passer rating against. So he has been really sharp in the slot position. This is a very good trio of corners that the Jets have. All 3 of them are going to be good to go for this game. And so the Jets should be at full strength there. This is going to be that star-studded matchup when you're looking at the Jets secondary against Seattle's receivers. They've had issues at times putting points on the board against teams that don't have the secondary talent that the Jets do. And if you go back to 2022, last time these 2 teams played, Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed were the starters on the outside. DK Metcalf had 1 catch for 3 yards in that game. Tyler Lockett had 2 catches for 15 yards. No receivers on Seattle's roster had more than 15 yards in that game. They won fairly convincingly. They got their tight ends involved in that game. They ran the ball well. So they were able to do some things to offset that. But the Jets corners won that game. Of course, the element that wasn't there, Jackson Smith and Jigba was still at Ohio State at that point. So that is the wrinkle here. When you're talking about a guy that has had monster last 3 weeks, how does he change things, opening it up for DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the outside? Because of what he's doing, the Jets obviously have to account for him from the slot or the boundary, regardless of where he's at. So that's going to be a difference maker for Seattle. But still, you are playing one of the few secondaries that you can make a very strong argument has the pieces to match up in the slot and both boundary positions against Seattle's receiving core. So from a matchup perspective there, the Jets have some things working for themselves going into this game. Can the Seahawks produce better than they did a few years ago on the outside? We shall have to wait and see. But the Jets have some of the elements that you are looking for that have given Seattle some issues, or at least match up well with their strengths. There's a lot of strength on strength when you're looking at this football game. And there's some obvious major advantages, including Quinnen Williams going up against either Seattle Seahawks or Laken Tomlinson in the middle that could work to the Jets' advantage playing at MetLife Stadium. That's why, to me, this is certainly a scarier team than the 3-8 record suggests. Seattle cannot sleepwalk in this game, or you're going to be back to 6-6, and you could plunge all the way back down to the bottom of the division potentially to stay in first place. Seattle's going to have to be cognizant of the fact that this is a team that has nothing to lose at 3-8. They're still not technically eliminated from the playoffs. They're going to be trying to get a big win coming out of their bye week and see if they can turn their season around the way the Seahawks have the last couple weeks, since their bye You can't take this team lightly. They've got nothing to lose. All the change, all the turnover that there's been there. They just kind of want to see if they can silence their critics, at least for a week. And there is plenty of talent on both sides of the football. With that being said, how do the Seahawks get it done? They're still the favorites in this game at MetLife Stadium. How do they beat the New York Jets and send them to their 9th loss, stay atop the NFC West standings? Going to be breaking that down next, building a game plan for a Seahawks victory this morning here on our Sunday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This Sunday pregame show is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. Tackle the NFL action here in Week 13 with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can watch live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can bet on everything from Garrett Wilson scoring a touchdown against the Seahawks secondary today, or Jack Smith-Njigba being the first player with a 30-plus yard reception. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to our pregame Sunday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, whether you are in nearby Vancouver, Washington, or you're up in Vancouver, British Columbia. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you tuning in this morning for a rare Sunday pregame show. Thanksgiving week changed things up for our schedule a little bit, but nonetheless, we're still going to be diving into a game plan for Seahawks victory. We've got picks to click and predictions coming up as we draw closer to kickoff at MetLife Stadium. Let's get to that game plan, shall we? And when you look at the New York Jets, sometimes statistics can be a little bit deceiving when you're looking at a team and the way that they performed on the field. The Jets are not that case. You look at where New York has struggled statistically, the film matches what you see with those statistics. And from a defensive perspective, has been a team that has been stifling. They've been suffocating defending the pass, at least in terms of not giving up touchdowns. They have allowed 8 passing touchdowns the entire season. That's the fewest in the entire NFL. And that's a testament to Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Michael Carter II, that secondary just talked about. And they have a solid pass rush led by Quinnen Williams. They just added Hassan Reddick a few weeks ago, finally ended that holdout. And we know his capabilities rushing off the edge. So this is a team that's been very good defending the pass. You can't say the same against the run, however. They're 21st in rushing yards allowed, and they're 27th in rushing touchdowns allowed. So in the red zone, they have been poor defending the run. And when I watched this team, when I turned on some tape earlier this week looking at the Jets, and I've, unfortunately, given the way they played this year, I've had a chance to watch a few of their games live at the time they've been playing. They've had a number of primetime games. What has really been an Achilles heel for this Jets defense defending the run has been tackling. They have missed C.J. Mosley, who is listed as questionable, but probably not going to be playing this game. I did not get a chance to look at the Jets inactives, but he's dealing with a neck injury. He hasn't played since October 20th. He's been out. So they've been rolling with Quincy Williams, and they've also had Sherwood, their other linebacker, who's under 225 pounds. He is actually leading the team in tackles this year, but he's missed a lot of stops. Sherwood has a 12.3% missed tackle rate against the run this year, according to Pro Football Focus. And Williams is not much further behind, 11.3% this year. Both those guys have left a lot of plays in the field. And when you look at what the Jets have in the interior, Quinnen Williams is an outstanding all-around player. He can defend the run. He can rush the passer. Javon Kinlaw has been a little bit more of a pass rusher, but he's capable of defending the run. He's had a solid season in that regard. What I think you got to do based on the tape that I've watched with this team, I think you have got to be able to run the football off tackle in this game and try to force the linebackers to pursue. Quincy Williams is an athletic linebacker, so is Sherwood. However, there's been so many plays this year on film where those two players, when they have been forced to track down a ball carrier off tackle, they have had issues actually wrapping the guy up and finishing the play. And that's been a huge factor in all of the missed tackles and the high missed tackle rates they've had this year. So I don't look at this as a game that you want to necessarily try to go right at Quinnen Williams all the time. You can do that some because I think it does keep him a little bit more off balance in terms of rushing the passer. It can be used as a tactic to slow him down a little bit in the pass rushing department. But I don't think it would be necessarily the smartest plan to just come in and say, we're going to run it right between the tackles, right down your throat. I think you've got to have some off-tackle plays, maybe some perimeter plays as well, and try to force these linebackers to pursue sideline to sideline to see if they can finish plays. If they are able to do that, then good for them. That's a difference from what we've seen in the first 12 weeks of the season, where they have not consistently been able to make those tackles when they have been asked to get out in space and pursue sideline to sideline. So I think that's a big thing that the Seahawks are going to need to do in this game. Secondly, in the passing game, you look at New York's numbers, and I've thrown a bunch of them out already. They have given up the fewest passing touchdowns in the NFL. They have the 31st passing defense in terms of yards allowed. Their second fewest, but 31st on that metric as well. That's a good thing if you're a Jets fan. They have limited passing yardage. They're number one in yards after the catch. The quick dump-offs, they have been great. Their secondary coming up and making plays. Unlike their linebackers, they've been able to get guys to the ground and limit the damage after the catch. However, they only have a couple of interceptions from their secondary, and they also have issues with being grabby, in particular Sauce Gardner. He has had problems with penalties. There is an aggressiveness to the way that he plays the game that can backfire on him. This still feels like a secondary that you don't want to do it often, but you have to be able to take some of those shots. You got to be able to take advantage of that aggressiveness and use it against the secondary for the Jets. DJ Reed, even in his time in Seattle, he had some issues with that occasionally where he got a little bit handsy. Can you get some big penalties against the Jets on the road that you can use as chunk plays? Or can you hit on a few of those? They don't give up many explosives, but this has been a defense that has a few times this year allowed receivers to get over the top against them. And so I don't think this is a game that you can come in and say our game plan is to chuck it downfield necessarily, but you also have got to be aggressive enough to try to capitalize, take advantage of how aggressive those corners are, the way they play up front. And you have the receivers to be able to do that with. DK Metcalf, he's going to look at that first time he played against Sauce Gardner and say, well, look, 1 catch, 3 yards, that's not happening again. He is still a physical specimen, even for somebody like Gardner to deal with. And then you now have added Smith and Jigba, at the slot position, that he is going to have the size and the ability to create that very few players do from that position. So Michael Carter II, as good as he's been, this is going to be maybe the toughest test he's had to this point, having to deal with Jackson Smith and Jigba in the interior, and even Tyler Lockett going up against his old friend DJ Reed. Can you get him downfield? Geno Smith just missed hitting him for a long touchdown when these teams played a couple of years ago. I know it's been 2 seasons ago, but still, the fact is those matchups, there were some plays that unfortunately were not hit. The Jets were able to get some pressure on Geno Smith that contributed to some of those plays missing. You got to be able to find those right spots to be aggressive, because this is a team that's had issues with penalties in their secondary, and they've also had a tendency once in a blue moon to give up a big play because of how aggressive they are. So I think that you can't back down and just say we're going to dump it off every play. There's got to be a concerted effort to be able to try to take a few of those shots, set those up with the run game and with some of those short passes in this contest. And I think when you look at the offensive line, this may seem like a given, but I think this is a game where max protection. You got to find a way to bring extra guys in to help out. And that's also knowing that Abraham Lucas on the right side, he's going to be playing next to a rookie that's never played in a regular season game. It's Sataoa Laumea. You're probably going to have Abe Lucas helping out Sataoa Laumea some, which means off edge, you're going to need running backs, tight ends. They're going to be able to help out. I don't think this is a game where you can do a bunch of 5 wide stuff and really try to spread the Jets out. I think you're going to have some extra blockers inside to get some more protection. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult to be able to pass the football against this team, especially with the interior talent that the Jets have, led by Quinnen Williams. They are going to have to be able to provide some help for those players in the interior, and then that as a result, ripple effect wise, you're going to have to do some things helping out off the edge as well. So this is not a game. It feels like you can try to mitigate that pass rush as much by spreading things out. You're going to have to find a way to mix in more protection, get other bodies in there, and try to be able to chip, whatever you got to do, just to give Geno Smith a little bit more time to operate in the pocket. To me, that's critical for the Seahawks to win this game. On the defensive side of the football, first and foremost, Aaron Rodgers has always been lethal against the blitz. However, at this stage of his career, this is not the Aaron Rodgers we saw for much of his time in Green Bay in terms of his mobility. He's not a guy that's going to beat you with his legs. He's not going to create out of the pocket very often. And he's averages 5.5 yards per attempt this year when blitzed. That clock has been sped up, and the Jets have not been able to create big plays. And that's been one of the things defenses have been able to consistently do to keep this passing game from really taking off, getting that pressure on Aaron Rodgers and forcing him to unload the football quickly. The Jets have not created after the catch very well. That has been a recipe to really get this offense for New York off track. And I think the second thing, with Allen Lazard being on injured reserve, one of Aaron Rodgers' favorite receivers, had chemistry with him dating back to their time in Green Bay. You've got Davante Adams, you got Garrett Wilson, two really talented receivers that both on the outside and in the slot can cause problems. But this is a game that I look at where you try to take those two away and say, okay, if a third receiver steps up and has a fairly big game, credit to that guy. But we're not going to let Davante Adams or Garrett Wilson beat us. We're not going to let either one of these guys have a monster game. I think this is a game where you're going to potentially see a little bit more usage of bracket coverage by the Seahawks secondary. Make sure you've got safety help over the top. Let's take away, as much as we can at least, take away Wilson and Adams. Let's force Aaron Rodgers to beat us with those secondary weapons, which the Jets have had a tough time doing most of this season offensively. So I think if you can speed that clock up for Rodgers, I'm not saying blitz him a ton, but find some different looks to mix in there, different corners, linebacker, safety blitzes, and try to catch him off guard. It's going to be difficult with the fact he has seen everything, but he's also not near as nimble. And this year it's been tough sledding for the Jets to be able to get much yardage when they have been blitzed this year. So I think that that's going to be key, and mixing in some bracket coverage. Don't let Davante Adams, Garrett Wilson beat you over the top. Don't let them beat you one-on-one situations. Try to provide extra support to deal with those two, and be confident that the rest of your defense and one-on-ones, they can win against the Jets tight ends and against the rest of their wide receivers. And the last thing for me on this game plan, force Aaron Rodgers to shoulder the load. The Jets have a thunder and lightning package at running back. You've got Breece Hall, and you've got Braylon Allen, the rookie out of Wisconsin. Now, Allen's averaging just 3.7 yards per carry, but he's a 245-pound battering ram. Breece Hall is in the top 15 among NFL running backs in breakaway percentage, design runs going 15-plus yards. So he's the home run hitter. He's the one that can get big chunk plays with his speed, and he is an electric back. He can also catch the football a little bit out of the backfield. You have to find a way to neutralize the Jets on early downs. If you allow them to run the ball and you set up those third and manageable, third and short situations, Aaron Rodgers is still incredibly effective in those situations. And so I think for the Seahawks to be able to do what they got to do on defense today, is going to boil down to slowing down that run game on first, second down. Can you get in those 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and long situations that the Jets have not been good at converting this year, and you can force Aaron Rodgers to try to shoulder the load, beating you downfield. He just doesn't have the mobility that he used to have. Either you got to be able to find a way to slow down this run game the way you have the last couple of weeks. New York, on the flip side, they're going to be looking to try to get back that run game going where it was at earlier in the year, where that was a big part of their offense that led to a couple of victories early in the year. It's been a struggle ever since. But that thunder and lightning package against the Seahawks defense, that's going to be the key. Can you slow down Breece Hall and Braylon Allen? If they're able to do that, sell out against the run and really force Aaron Rodgers and this passing game to beat you, I think that that is the recipe to beat this team. And we've seen a number of teams successfully deploy that this year, where they've been able to take away Breece Hall and Braylon Allen, and they've made this a one-dimensional offense. And Aaron Rodgers has not been able to carry him at this stage in his career, even with some of the receivers that they have. All right, let's switch gears now here on our Sunday pregame show here on Locked On Seahawks. We got some picks to click. We've got a few game predictions to dish out. And normally, my co-host Nick Lee is with me on this final episode of the week. Since we didn't do it on Friday, though, he is no longer on the show this week. That being said, we did get a game prediction from Nick. I will go through that. Let's talk picks to click. And this is an interesting one for me. When I look at this matchup on paper, the Seahawks look to be the superior team. They've definitely been playing better as of late. And I do think that there is one spot the Seahawks can really take advantage of this New York Jets team, and it's running the football. And they haven't been able to do this year. They've played some teams with subpar run defenses, still have not been able to run the ball. But this is a Jets defense that consistently has struggled to slow down running backs. They've had 5 games. They've given up at least 145 rushing yards this year. They are near the bottom of the league in a number of metrics. They've given up a ton of rushing touchdowns in the red zone. They have not been effective slowing down run games. So my pick to click on offense, it's got to be Ken Walker III. He is currently leading all running backs in missed tackles forced, according to Pro Football Focus. That matches the film. The yardage he's gotten, he's had to create himself because of how poor the blocking has been up front. On one hand, you're going to be playing a rookie in Seattle Seahawks at right guard. That could end up making this an even tougher sled for Ken Walker III and company. But as I mentioned earlier, this Jets linebacking group has not been great in terms of finishing tackles. You're going against a guy that is an expert at creating yardage after contact and making guys miss. Ken Walker III against that linebacking core. I just think that this is a game, even in the passing game too, get him some quick dump offs and force those linebackers to go out and cover him, try to tackle him in space. I think that that is a recipe for success for the Seahawks, and I just think he is well overdue for a big game. Feels like it's been a long time since Ken Walker III's even been to like 80, 90 rushing yards. I think he gets to 100 in this game. I just think that Seattle's going to be able to run the football. I think that Seattle Seahawks, that's the strength in his game. I think he's going to be able to help this team a little bit in that regard, and I like that matchup against the linebackers. You get into the second level or you get him off tackle, and those linebackers have to make plays in space. I like Ken Walker III to be able to make some magic happen in those situations and get in the end zone at least one time in this game. So he's my pick to click on offense. As for the defensive side of the ball, Draymond Jones has had a very up and down second season. There's been a couple of games where he's really jumped out, Atlanta being the most notable, a road game, an early start. I like this matchup for him going up against Fashanu, the first-round pick out of Penn State. He's going to be starting at left tackle now that their veteran starter, Tyron, injury, neck injury. Fashanu is an athletic player, but he has had issues with power rushers dating back to his time in the Big Ten. I think Draymond Jones, with his power at 280 pounds, I think that is an ideal matchup that he can take advantage of. He actually had a pretty good game last week against Arizona, had a couple of pressures. I like him going against Fashanu in this one. And even on the other side against Morgan Moses, the two veterans going against each other, I think Draymond Jones is going to get to Aaron Rodgers for at least 1 sack in this game. And I think he's going to get to at least 4 pressures. I just think that they're going to try to take advantage. Seattle is putting him over against Fashanu and letting him use his power and his physicality against a rookie who has been better against finesse rushers than bull rushers, even at the college level. And he's still got to hit the weight room a little bit and get stronger. Take advantage of that matchup by putting the right personnel over there, take advantage of it. I think Boye Mafe has the ability to do that too, but I think Draymond Jones matches up well with what the Jets do offensively and what their offensive line brings to the table in this game. And I just have a feeling that Jones is going to have a big game. As I mentioned earlier, look, I don't necessarily love the term trap game. I think it gets overused. I think it's cliche. But this is a trap game. There is no question about it. The New York Jets are 3-8, but you look at the roster and the players they have. Aaron Rodgers, he might not be the multi-time MVP that he was earlier in his career, but he's still Aaron Rodgers. He's still got a decent stat line. He's still any given Sunday can go to the Fountain of Youth and play a really good game. You got 2 solid running backs. They have improved most of their offensive line. They got some injuries there, but they still have improved that line some, both in run blocking and pass protecting. On defense, this is a stifling pass defense with Sauce Gardner and company in the secondary. The pass rushing ability up front with Reddick now joining the team, Quentin Williams in the middle. This is a team that has way more talent than the record suggests. And those are teams you worry about playing late in the season, or at least have some concern because, hey, you got nothing to lose. And they've got plenty of guys that are going to be looking to try to latch on elsewhere next season, with the Jets likely to blow this roster up. So you want to show out well at the end of the season and play spoilers to an extent. They're coming off a bye. I think this is a game that is going to be very tight throughout, especially on the road. That being said, I think the Seahawks, they are playing well enough right now, and I think they've got enough confidence that they are not going to be coming into this game thinking, oh, we've got this made. I don't think Mike Macdonald's going to allow that to happen. They want to keep this show rolling. They know they're only a game over 500. Every game is a playoff game right now. I think it's going to be tight. I think the Jets are going to make this one that Seahawks fans are going to have to sweat out a little bit. But my coach, Nick Lee, and I both are in agreement. When we came up with our score predictions this week, almost identical. I'm going 23-16 Seahawks over the Jets. Nick going 23-17 in this game. I have the Jets being limited to fewer touchdowns in this game and having to settle for field goals, which is the difference in our score prediction. But both of us have the Seahawks scoring 23. I don't see this being a game where a lot of points are scored, but I think Seattle's got to get to 20 plus to win this game. And if you look at the last two games, they didn't do that against San Francisco. They didn't do that against Arizona. They had 26 combined offensive points in those games. You need to put up at least 20 offensive points in this game, and I think they need to get at least 2 or 3 sacks on Aaron Rodgers. The run game has to be held under 100 yards. We'll just go with 100 rushing yards this game. I think if the Seahawks can do those things, they get a really good chance to win this one. But I think that this is kind of a scary Week 13 matchup because of where it's being played out of the road. Seattle's historically played really well at MetLife. Does that carry over into the Mike Macdonald era? We will find out. But I think this is going to be a close game. I think the Seahawks get it done by 1 score, but I think that the Jets are absolutely going to make this a nail-biter. I'm expecting a healthier Aaron Rodgers to make this a difficult one on Mike Macdonald and the defense. I think it's going to be more of a defensive game, but Seattle's going to have to score more points than they did the last 2 games if they want to get to 3 consecutive wins and stay atop the NFC West. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. A few hours from now, we get past the game, the final play, final whistle. After press conferences, we will have our weekly post-game show. Join Connor Benintendi and I, and we'll dive into our game balls and offense, defense, special teams, 3 up, 3 down, and key storylines, hopefully coming out of a 3rd straight Seahawks win. Enjoy the contest coming up at MetLife, and thanks for listening in. Go Hawks.